Passover Crash Course. In this episode of the Crash Course, in this class, we are going to be talking about koshering our dishes for Pesach. And so, what does this mean? Why do we have to do it? What are we doing? How do we do it? What does koshering even mean? Well, koshering is just another way of saying koshering. So, we're making our dishes kosher for use during Passover. Now, why do we have to do this? Well, throughout the year, usually we are cooking chametz, which in our last course we discussed what exactly that is, which to remind everybody, that is basically fermented grains that have been exposed to liquids or to moisture for longer than 18 minutes. So, why do we have to kosher our dishes for Passover? Well, the koshering process will actually get rid of all of that chametz that gets absorbed into these dishes. And so once we do that, then we can actually use these dishes for Passover. Now, it is best to have a separate set of dishes for specifically for Passover. I know it might sound like overkill because Passover is only about a week, but it does make it easier for most people. We don't have to do this. There is no mitzvah saying that we are mandated to buy extra pots, pans, plates, forks, anything. But it's a heck of a lot easier. So if you don't feel like buying a whole new uh, kitchen, basically, then this video is definitely for you. And it's for me because I don't want to buy a bunch of new dishes either. So another option is that we can buy all plastic and paper disposable products. I'm a big fan of this. However, it can get costly, especially year after year. So if you don't want to do that, and if you'd rather take the cheaper route of not buying new permanent dishes and not buying disposable dishes or utensils, then stick around. We'll talk about how we can do that. So let's talk about first how are dishes and utensils kosher to begin with. How do we kosher any dishes at all? Well, first we have to take them to a mikveh, and we also have to boil them if they were previously purchased, or excuse me, if they were purchased from somebody, if they were previously used. So if they're brand new, they do not have to be boiled. They do not have to be torched, as we will see. Some dishes will have to be. But brand new dishes do not need the Gehenna treatment. They don't need to be exposed to fire or boiling or anything of the sort. All we have to do is toivel them in a mikveh, that is, dip them into a mikveh in the proper way, reciting the bracha, and then we are good to go. Rather, the dishes and the utensils are good to go for us to use, and then we ourselves are good to go. So, all vessels are koshered according to the principle of kavala, which means the manner in which it absorbs the taste is the manner in which it expels the taste. So if it absorbs the taste or absorbs the substance through boiling, then the way to get it out is through boiling. If you if the item absorbs it through direct exposure to fire, then you have to directly expose this utensil to fire in order to purge it out. Now you're asking, how are we supposed to do that? If boiling puts it in, then how is boiling taking it out? You know, our mental state, our intentions are not going to change the physical world. Right? Our hopes and dreams, they don't change anything unless we take action, right? So the boiling process itself needs to change, just as humans need to change to achieve things in the world. The physics, while the physics is not changing, something in the process needs to change. Now, what do we do? Well, often what is involved is simply changing the heat. The heat will actually push all the substance out and it will purge our vessels and utensils of whatever substance has infiltrated them. So sometimes this will be something unkosher that we got from, say, Goodwill or a neighbor or something. Uh, and so then that's how we purge it of any potentially unkosher substances like pork or shellfish or anything of the like. But there are two different ways that we can use, and really there's four, but two main ways. One is scalding things with boiling water. Now we can do this either through dipping items into a pot of boiling, roaring, boiling water. Don't try to say that 5 times fast. Roaring, boiling water. Another way that we can do it is exposing it to direct heat. Now, ways that we can do that is either by, as we'll see, sticking it in the oven, turning it up to the highest heat, or getting out the old blowtorch and blowtorching the actual item. Which, if you have never owned a blowtorch or have never used a blowtorch, well, here you go. Being Jewish comes with its perks, doesn't it? So now is the time where you can get to use a blowtorch. And with a bottle of olive oil or Lysol, maybe you can make a flamethrower or something. Just kidding. For safety purposes, don't do that. So, the two ways that we're talking about, that was a joke wink, by the way. The two ways that we're talking about for koshering is Hagala and Libun. Now, Hagala is dipping things into boiling water. And this is great for wood, metal, stone, or even bone. Now, it doesn't mean that just because these substances are made of these materials that they can always be koshered. But as a general rule, these can be. There are exceptions, and these exceptions are very important. For example, china dishes cannot be koshered. One, because of the substance, two, because usually they break, unfortunately. So the second way is libun, which is, as I said, it's exposing it to direct heat. Now, why do I say direct heat? Well, it's because we can either expose it to very hot temperatures, and we're not talking about leaving it in the sun in Arizona in the summer. What we're talking about is leaving it in the oven. And so we're going to turn it up to the highest heat possible. And this is called libun kal, which is a light burning. Now, the other way, using a blowtorch, is just simply referred to as libun, and it's a way that works for basically everything, right? It's the end all be all. Everybody agrees it can purge basically everything. If you have, let's say, a wooden spoon or scooper or something, uh, direct fire might not work in that case, but in other instances, it will. I've heard plastic also does not do well with fire. So there are a few instances where it just simply wouldn't be smart. But technically, it is, in a very practical sense, effective and halakhically acceptable. Now, when do we use this? Well, typically we'll only be using this with metal. Why? It's the only thing that can survive the heat. And it's the only thing that we ever can cook to such a hot degree in the first place, even apart from koshering. The only materials that will ever heat to such a degree that we'll need to use libun or libunkal. So, remember, for most materials, we're simply going to be immersing them in boiling water. For certain metal objects, like pots and pans, or sometimes even like grilling tongs, we're going to be exposing them to direct heat. I will add, for those things that need to simply endure a light burning, or libunkal, what we're going to be doing is turning up the oven. We're going to stick these items in the oven. Now, make sure that they don't have plastic or rubber handles. That could be the end of your pot or pan. We'll be turning it up to the highest heat, which is usually somewhere around 550 or 600, but we'll turn it up to the highest setting, and we'll leave it on for about an hour. And that will do the job very well. Now, this process does involve some preparation. What are we going to be doing? So, to prepare, we want to remove all of the food stuck onto the pots and pans, spoons, plates, um, lids for pots and pans, everything that we're going to be koshering, we want to clean immaculately, right? We want it to be so clean that we can eat right off of it. Some people will eat off dirty dishes. That's their prerogative, but that doesn't work for the koshering process. So what we're going to be doing is scrape off all the little specks, and we need to be very meticulous. So go over, even if you have to use a toothbrush, they're $1. It's worth it. Get along the edges, get along the rim. In fact, I have a prop for today's video. As we can see, this is a very dirty pan because it's very dusty. I have to clean it. I have to get a toothbrush and clean it. But what we're going to be doing, we'll be taking a lid like this, and we'll be going all along the edges. And we'll be making sure that everything is perfectly clean. After we make sure that all of the food is off, all of the, in my case, all the dust is off, and all of the residue from boiled water from previous koshering sessions, we want to make sure that it's perfectly clean, just like new, just like you bought it in the store. Now, sometimes, especially pots and pans, things that we fry things in, they might have stains. Now, anything that can be scraped off or cleaned off in any way needs to be taken off. But if it is so cooked into the pan that when you run your finger over it, it feels perfectly flat, close your eyes and you run your finger over it again and you simply can't tell when it starts and when it ends, that is okay. So according to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, that is the Ashkenazi Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, commented upon by Rabbi Shlomo Gansfried, he says, a mere discoloration of the surface is of no significance. And that is according to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch 116.3. Now, after this, all of the utensils that you intend to kosher must go unused for a 24-hour period. So if you finished koshering it at, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they cannot be used for any purpose. This is just for practical reasons, and I'll explain in just a minute. They cannot be used until 3 o'clock the next day. And really, if you want to be strict, wait, give it another few minutes. So let's say 3:05, 3:10, even 3:30, just to be safe, because clocks can be a little bit off. So just to be safe, wait a little bit longer than a 24-hour period. But 24 hours is sufficient. As a side note, some knives can be koshered with hagala, that is boiling, but it's a difficult topic. There's actually many halachos that go along with that, and oftentimes it's simply not worth doing. So it's best simply just to get a new set of knives. We can often get a new set of knives from, say, the dollar store for $10. It's quite cheap. Now, if you have to because it's simply too expensive to buy more, there are ways that we can do that, but we're not going to be covering that today, simply because I don't think that most people will be dealing with that. So there are ways to do it. It is complicated, so that could possibly be a whole video in itself. Because knives, just like bread has special status, wine has special status in Judaism, knives, when it comes to koshering, also have a special status, and we need to do extra things with those. I think of them as bonus mitzvahs. So that'll be the end of that for knives. Now, in terms of tables, what can we do with tables? Because often throughout the year we will spill breadcrumbs, mac and cheese, grilled cheeses, sandwiches, chametz spills all over the table, possibly even every day, right? We'll even be talking to our wife and we'll put that bagel down right onto the table. Of course, after it's been cleaned, so there's no kid fingerprints anywhere. But we'll put it down onto the tabletop, and so now the tabletop has become chametz thick. That is, it's become chametzy, right? It's become the very thing that we're trying to clean, that we're trying to get rid of for Pesach. So what are we supposed to do? Well, we need to make sure that, just like the dishes before we kosher them, we need to clean off the tabletop as best as we can, make sure that all the stuck-on stuff, all of the paint from arts and crafts, all of the stuck on food, everything that we possibly can, namely food. If there's other things like glue or something, that's different. But the main thing is food, because sometimes paint and glue can be extremely difficult to get up. But the main thing is food, like I said. Try to get everything off as much as we possibly can, make sure it's very clean, just like brand new, just like our brand new dishes. And after that, we want to make sure that nothing is put on the table, again, for 24 hours. Now, after that 24-hour period, then we will take scalding hot water, pour it all over the table, and there you go. Your table has been koshered. I will say it's also customary to put a tablecloth on the table after this to protect it. It will make your life a lot easier. It doesn't have to be an expensive one. You can tin foil it, saran wrap it, put a table, a tablecloth over it. Uh, it is up to you. There is no requirement for any material. On to our next thing. Hagala is sufficient for cups. So, as we covered previously, just a few minutes ago, we've already scrubbed all of our dishes clean. We've already scrubbed out all of our knives. We've already scrubbed off our table. We've already scrubbed out our mugs, plates, forks, everything. And now we've come down to the cups, which we've already scrubbed out. We've waited a complete 24 hours to touch these cups. And of course, you can touch them. We just simply don't use them. We don't put any coffee or orange juice or anything in them, or tea. And so we've waited the full 24-hour period to use these cups. Now, what we're going to do is that we are going to take a pot, and we are going to get some tongs and take the cup. And this is actually how we're going to um, use Hagala for all of our items. In fact, I'm going to get up. I'm wearing my work pants, so you might see my painted up work pants. I'm a painter. But I'm going to show you what we're going to do. Here is the giant Kashering pot that I have. As we can see, it's like the ship at the beginning of Star Wars. It just never ends. Yes, I did use that joke last time. Now, here is the lid that I showed at the beginning. I know you can't see my face, but what we're going to do... it's so hot, it's boiling. Good thing I have these tongs to dip everything in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my glasses case as an example. I'll take this cup and I'll dip it in, and I'll make sure that I am no longer touching them with the tongs. So that will be in there, and I'll let it completely boil. I'll move it around a little bit and make sure that the boiling water touches the bottom of the cup, of the fork, of the bowl, whatever we're koshering. I'll reach back in, I'll pull it out. Now it's customary to rinse under cold water these utensils that we take out of the boiling water. We don't necessarily have to, so if you don't, you're fine. You didn't screw up, you're totally good, but it is customary to rinse them off in cold water. I feel like I should be on QVC after that. Brought to you by the Kashering Company. So that's how we kosher our dishes with Hagala. Again, we can do this for wooden objects, certain metal objects, stone, and bone as well. Now, Ashkenazim, regard, and that is the Jews of Europe, we Ashkenazim regard Hagala as ineffective for glass. There's a reason for this, I'll get into in just a minute. So instead of using Hagala for glass, we're going to be using a light libun. That is, putting it in the oven and cranking it up to the highest heat for a certain amount of time. Now, for Sephardim, they are from the Ashkenazi perspective, I'll say, are more lenient, or from the Sephardic perspective, Ashkenazim are overly strict. So it depends on what perspective you're coming from. For Sephardim, what you have to do is simply wash off your glass as well as you can, as well as you can. Make sure it's perfectly clean, and that will be sufficient for you. Glass cups actually do not need to, technically, they do not need to be koshered. So now regarding, like I said, glass, Pyrex, Duralax, and all related glass materials, as I said, Sephardim thoroughly rinse the utensils, and some soak in water 72 hours, and then changing the water every 24 hours. So they'll immerse some, this is not all, but some have chosen to immerse these waters, excuse me, immerse these utensils and vessels in water. We don't want it too hot, but just cold or lukewarm water for a total of 72 hours. Now, after every 24-hour period, let's say you put it in at noon, then the next day you take it out, change the water, put new water in. And then do this 3 times for 3 days straight, and that is sufficient. But as I stated previously, there are some who don't soak their dishes and simply make sure that the utensils are clean and that there's no crud stuck on the insides of them, and you are good to go. Now, regarding porcelain, china, ceramic, often you'll find things like little saucers or bowls or teacups made of this. These things unfortunately cannot be koshered. So you are allowed to have them during Passover, but we simply can't use them during Passover to drink from anyway, or to eat from. We can certainly use them for decoration, but we can't use them for consuming food. Now, in the Ashkenazi world, some authorities do permit koshering plastic in the event of dire need. So if you really have to, there are ways to do that. And basically all you do is that you stick it in boiling water. You use the Hagala method of koshering. Now, in a bit of an unusual case, the Sephardim are actually more stringent than the Ashkenazim. And the Sephardim say that because plastic absorbs the flavor of its substances, which if any of you have ever had spaghetti, you know that it stains the plastic. They say that plastic cannot be koshered. So let's just review a little bit. Ashkenazim say you have to, I'll put it like this, you cannot use Hagala, that is boiling water immersion, for glass, namely glass cups, because that's really what we're going to be using. Sephardim say that you can use Hagala for glass cups, and some simply just wash them off cleanly. For plastic, some Ashkenazim will say that you can use Hagala to kosher them, and also, again, make sure that they're clean, wait 24 hours, then Hagala. Sephardim will not kosher plastic, because in that perspective, it absorbs, which, even being Ashkenazi, I happen to agree with that, but that's not my mind. So, now, according to a few authorities, see, we can always compliment other people even if we don't personally abide by that. That's why I think that there's good in everybody. We can always compliment people, even if we're different. So, but anyway, so according to a few authorities, Hagala, that remember that's boiling water, might even work for some countertops. Now, it's not technically called hagala. It's a different term, but it does involve boiling water. So instead of, again, dipping something into the giant pot of boiling water, what we're going to be doing, we'll be taking that pot and dumping it. So it's another term. I don't want to confuse anybody, but just remember it involves boiling water. So, according to a few authorities, pouring the boiling water might work. It might work for some countertops, but an Evan Meluban, which is a heated stone. This is a bit of a complicated process. If any of you have questions, please feel free to ask somebody else. No, I'm just kidding. You're more than welcome to contact me and ask me. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Also, I will say that if I either miss your question, don't answer it very well, if I have no clue how to answer it, Chabad.org also, as always, has excellent resources. There are also many websites online that say ask the rabbi, message the rabbi, something to this effect. There's plenty of resources, but as I said, if I can answer your questions, I'm more than happy to do so. So, like I said, according to some authorities, I can't talk today. Pouring the boiling water. I think I said all that properly. Pouring the boiling water over countertops, certain countertops, not all countertops, but certain materials of countertop might work. We're not saying, it might work. We're saying it never works, except possibly for a few over here. There's some hope. We're taking a more of a hopeful perspective in this regard. So Hagala, again, it's not technically Hagala, but it's pouring the boiling water that might be effective. But in the case where it is not effective to douse it with pouring boiling water, then you'll need a heated stone. How you do that basically is that you can take a torch to it. You might even be able to use the oven, and we can go from there. I don't personally recommend this, especially if you're not used to doing this, because you can catch things on fire. You can also get hurt. So, to pick up these heated stones, we need fire-resistant gloves, so that when you pick it up, you're not burning yourselves. I actually used to work as a welder previously, working in the I really can't talk today. Working in the auto industry, and I have burned my hands before. It's not fun. So make sure whatever you are doing, always wear your protective equipment, your PPEs, your personal protective equipment. So, getting back to countertops, as I said, some say it's acceptable to pour it boiling water over the surface. Some will use the heated stones. Everybody agrees that the heated stones will work. This also requires you to pour boiling hot water over them. It's not just the stones. Again, it's a complicated process. I don't personally recommend it for people who are new, but if you know what you're doing, by all means, go for it. Now, what if you don't have a countertop that is made of materials that you can use the pouring of boiling hot water? I got it that time. The pouring of boiling hot water, got it again. Or if you don't want to use the heated stone, then what you can do, and I'm sure that all of you have either heard about this or seen pictures of it, is that what we can do is take a beautiful Passover classic tinfoil and cover the countertops with tinfoil. This will also work for sinks. Now, for metal sinks, again, we can use the method of Hagala, but certain like ceramic sinks, these cannot be kosher because it'll actually crack your sink. So I don't recommend doing anything to your sink. I do not want you to crack your expensive sink. Please don't do that. Make it clear. I am not recommending that. So what else you can do is either line it with tinfoil or you can use a sink insert. Now, I'm personally a fan of sink inserts. I'm not real fond of covering all of that with aluminum foil. It is just a personal preference. You're welcome to do any of these options that you like. So, moving on, we're almost done to ovens. Ovens are actually quite easy. Make sure, again, clean it out thoroughly. Wait 24 hours. Again, I think that some of you are catching on by now, even beforehand. Again, clean it out, wait 24 hours. And once you know it's spotless, and once you've waited this time, then what you can do is turn that dial to self clean or broil, whichever one you have. And if you have both, then self clean is preferable, but both will do the job. And you're going to want to do this for 45 to 60 minutes. After that, after your oven is spotless, and then you wait a day, and then you cook it super hot for 45 to 60 minutes, it will then be totally kosher Pesach. Now, for stovetop grates, I don't know why I think that these are fun, because they're actually really a hassle. Well, they can be, not always, but they are a little bit of a hassle just because if they're the wrought iron ones and they're the large ones that cover two different heating spots or two different burners, then they can be a little tricky. But um, personally, I find this one a little fun. So what we're going to be doing is we can, there's a way of doing it whereby we put it in the oven, but it's complicated. So I'll give you the easy way. Don't do it the way that I used to. Do it the new way that I have learned about. Now, some of these things, because technology has changed, the methods for koshering them have changed a little bit over time, simply because we're trying to find the best way to kosher them. So, here's the way that I'm going to be teaching you. And this really is a much easier way than how some people used to do it. So, we are going to wrap in our good friend, the aluminum foil. We're going to wrap in aluminum foil and turn the stove up to its highest setting for 10 to 15 minutes. So each little burner that we have, wrap that in foil, 10 to 15 minutes on the highest heat, you're good to go. Now, I don't recommend doing all the burners at once simply because it is a safety hazard. Remember, we're dealing with very hot temperatures. We don't want anybody to get burned. We don't want anything to catch on fire, including ourselves, including our kinderlach, our children, including Fluffy the dog. We don't want anything or anybody, reverse that, we don't want anybody or anything catching fire. So we also want to make sure that if you really want to, keep a pan of water handy, just in case. It shouldn't present any fire hazards, but it is always good to be extra cautious. Now, I also recommend not doing all the burners at once, and also, this is actually an important one. All of these are important, but this is extra important. We want to be watching the stove as we're doing this, and the reason being is that if anything does go wrong, we want to be able to mitigate that danger as quickly as possible. Now, the refrigerator and freezer. This is probably going to be one of the easiest ones because all that we have to do is clean them out. That's right. They don't have to be koshered for Passover. What we're going to do is simply get some chemicals, wipe everything down thoroughly, make it look as new as possible. And there you go. That's how you clean the fridge, freezer for Passover. Now, lastly, this is actually the last thing that we have for tonight. Imagine that. Imagine me having a video under an hour and staying on topic. For the dishwasher, what do we do with dishwashers? Well, unlike the fridge and freezer, this one is not as friendly. And the reason is because we can't kosher it. That's right, we cannot kosher the dishwasher. Now, me personally, I have done dishes by hand for about 10 years. I just have gotten in the habit of doing it. It's so easy, it's not a burden. Um, Even with a family of six, it's not that big of a deal. So, during the week of Pesach, uh, we're just going to be doing dishes by hand. But again, like I said in the intro, if we don't want to kosher our dishes for Pesach, then here's what we do. We put them all in a cabinet, tape off the cabinet, and use some Dixie cups and Dixie plates or something, or just disposable uh, products like this. So if you don't want to do dishes, the same advice applies, and the same advice can be useful. That if you don't want to wash out a cup, then buy disposable cups. If you don't want to wash off all the little inside parts of a fork or a spoon or a knife or a bowl, get disposable ones. These are entirely acceptable for Pesach, and there was a little bit of debate regarding whether this honors the holiday because they're not nice, they're not informal, but the general consensus is that these are perfectly fine. Many people use them, and if it makes the holiday more enjoyable for the people making it happen, which is the adults, the parents, then by all means do it. So, some of our main points for today: Hagala is the method of boiling utensils where we dip it into the pot of boiling water and we leave it in there for a few seconds and we take it out. We want to make sure that the item is touched by water in all directions, so you'll want to flip it around a little bit and bump it around, play with it. Um, but remember that it's not being koshered while you're touching it. So leave it in for a few seconds, flip it or move it. Um, Flipping it is better. So do that and then you are good to go. Some have the custom of rinsing these items off in cold water, but you don't have to. And just remember to stay classy. That's never been how I end videos, but we're going to start doing it for at least today. Stay classy. Have a good week. I plan to be back to. Where is it? It's not over there. It's. Let's see. Is that it? I think it might be it. Anyway, it's somewhere around here. We'll be back, B'ezras Hashem, with entering the light, um, with prayers and meditations for the holiday. So I hope you all are doing well, as always, and we'll see you in the next episode, B'ezras Hashem. So take care.